Hey everyone, and welcome to episode 3 of the Spark AI show. I'm here with Aaron Van Ruler. What's up, Aaron?
Nothing. What's up with you, TJ?
Not a lot, not a lot. Got some things going on, and we've actually got a plan for the episode, which I'm excited about. So that's good. We are through tax season, right? So big times. We can put that behind us, and we can look forward for some
All
amount of
everybody's
time.
got is just time on their hands to do nothing.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. I would assume that everybody is looking to take vacation. We've got the Right Now conference coming up. Quick plug
Yep.
for the Right Now conference. So we'll be doing a presentation there. So if you haven't signed up, sign up. And we hope to see you there. So that should be fun. I've never been to Austin, so Austin should be a good time.
I've been to Austin once, about 20 years ago. Well, sometime more than one, sometime less than 20. I've been married for 20 years and I went with my wife, so I know it's somewhere in the middle.
Nice. Yeah, I've not been to Austin, so I'm excited. I would assume Austin has changed a fair bit if it's been 20 years since you were there. So,
Yes.
um,
Oh, the side note, fun fact. My first picture on my phone is from Austin, like from, whatever iPhone era. So
nice.
maybe whatever 2007,
2007
8.
post 8.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, nice.
Yeah. Like looking back on my phone, that's one of my first pictures. So yes, there we go. Timeline.
That's fun. So yeah, hope to see you all there. Cool. So I think as we frame this, one of the reasons that I felt like we kind of jumped into this again today, I feel like we're kind of ringing the same bell over and over again. But I think it's important. We keep talking about use AI, get into AI, experience AI, figure out how it applies to you. And so, Aaron, there was a book just released from Ethan Mollick, who is one of the foremost thinkers on AI.
Hmm.
He is based out of, where's he based out of, Aaron? He's out of
He's a business school professor
Wharton.
at Wharton at UPenn. Yep.
Yeah.
So he's a business school focused professor, but for the last year or more, he's been like focused a lot on AI. And so he's a great follow on LinkedIn. He often posts multiple times a day of here's a new research paper that came out. Here's like the key findings from it. Dig in if you want, but he summarizes them very succinctly to get like the highlights out of it, and that's his world. So he knows like how to read like academic research papers, and so it's it's like really great. Thank you, Ethan, for
Yeah.
being the conduit.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep.
And so a lot of that material he's actually packaged up. I mean, as I'm reading through the book, which is show it up here,
There
co-intelligence,
you go.
right? So living and working with AI. A lot
Which
of
just came out earlier this month. Yep.
Yeah, yeah, yep. Back in early April.
Yep.
So we've taken a look at it. I haven't got all the way through the book, but there's a section in there early on that I thought was really pertinent to what we are talking about, sort of in our talks coming up and all of that. So it felt like a good thing to cover from Ethan's perspective. Um,
Yeah. And actually, as you're saying that, TJ, it makes me think of that article that came out a little bit ago just on Accenture. And they're like expected to make like something like $2.4 billion, essentially just helping companies adopt AI. And
yeah,
so you said, like, I feel like we're, you know, repeating the same thing over and over. But if Accenture is finding a niche in the market and there's a market that's willing to pay them, up multiple billions of dollars to help people integrate AI, I think it's a topic worth reconsidering over and over and over. Of how do you actually integrate AI into your sort of life and work and understanding? And I think Ethan's book, Co-Intelligence, sort of like hits right on that point.
yeah. Yeah, for sure. And obviously the Accenture, kind of the worlds maybe diverge and they're a little bit different. They're dealing with hundreds of millions of dollars in contracts and things and how
Sure,
to
sure.
implement. But I think, yeah, where you and I, when we read that, it's more like, okay, well, how do we take that and package that up into something that's more applicable for the 5-person, 20-person, 40-person
Right,
accounting firm,
right.
and I think
The
there's a
pain
lot that
point,
we can take.
the pain is still there. It's either impacting 1,000 people or impacting 5 people, but still,
Right.
somebody has to figure out how do we make decisions, how do we make choices, how do we like help each other. When do I use AI? When do I not use AI? So yeah,
Yeah.
different. Just add a couple zeros behind it, but I think it's essentially the same.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's all the same problems. So, Cool. So let's jump in. Let's talk about. So in Ethan's book, he talks about this 4 rules for co-intelligence, and so I just kind of want to walk through each of those and banter a little bit about what that means to us and how we feel like that applies. And so, first
Sure.
rule number one is always invite AI to the table. So,
Yeah,
and what
maybe
that means.
maybe rattle all of
Okay,
the
yeah.
4 off first. Yeah,
Yep,
yeah,
great. So always invite AI to the table is rule one. Number two, be the human in the loop. Number three is treat AI like a person. And then the caveat there is, but tell it what kind of person it is. And then the
yeah,
last one is assume this is the worst AI you will ever use, which I think is great that he ended on that one. I think that's a good one to always like. I know we say that all the time, like, uh, and the fact is, this is the worst it's ever going to be. Like, oh, it
yeah,
wasn't this good, but it's going to get better. In whatever use case. So,
yeah, yeah.
what does it mean for you to always invite AI to the table?
Yeah, I mean, we were just kinda chit-chatting a little bit before this, but I mean, I can think of an example from almost every day where I reach to AI to help me with something. So it could be a coding question of like, help me write this complicated database query. It can be we have a presentation. I was trying to figure out, how do I structure this? I know that 1,000 people have already thought about this, like essentially like the pitch deck presentation. So um, we were both kind of working on our own, and then like you came with an outline and I came with an outline. And it's like, oh, we actually both probably did the same thing, which was go to go to Spark or whatever and just say, I need to write a pitch deck. What are the 10 slide? What's the 10 slide version of this? I know there's a 10 slide version of this,
Yeah,
and help me with that. So,
yeah,
uh, yeah, just generally any kind of topic that I have in my head, I just like I've started to create the habit loop of I go to AI first versus like Google first.
yeah. Which does take a little bit. I'm thinking through a use case that I had recently. It does take a little bit of setup sometimes, right? So in my case,
Hmm.
one of the use it for everything, right? Kind of things for me, which is sort of my that's a note I took when I said always invite AI to the table. For me, it's use it for everything, right? And so for
Yeah.
me, a recent case, I play disc golf, and there's rules of disc golf, right? And they're similar to golf, but there's some areas where they differ, and so sometimes I have to reference the rules when I'm in a situation. And so I've actually talking about setup. I actually created a specific assistant, essentially within Spark that has the rules of disc golf loaded in. So when I have a question, I can now go to Spark and just pull up that assistant and say, "Hey, here's the scenario. What's the right answer?" Right. And so that came up the other day, and it gave me an answer, and I don't have to go fumbling through the book to figure out like what section code number is this.
Like rule 13.1
Exactly. And
A
like,
or
how does that
whatever. Yeah.
apply in this scenario? So that's an area where I'm like, that this is brilliant, right? On the course, I don't, we can get an answer. I don't have to go talk to the tournament director or anything like that. It's just here's what it says.
Yeah. Yeah.
The other one I
Um,
thought was interesting. You were talking about the thing. I went to it the other day. Again, in the use it for everything kind of modality here. It was uh, the dumbest thing, right? It should be top of mind. Somebody asked for a fun fact to put into like an icebreaker thing. Hey, what's a fun fact about you that nobody knows? Like, I don't know. I've used them all, like I don't know what nobody knows. So I just went to Spark and I said, "Hey, give me 10 ideas for fun facts," and it rattled off things, which just got my brain out of the like rut. That was really what it
yep.
was.
Yep.
So I'm not going to share it because it's coming up,
Oh, yeah.
and
Then I'll know.
yeah,
Then I'll
exactly.
know.
So
Yeah. I don't know if you were ready to transition to the next principle there, but that was actually part of in the book Ethan was talking about um being the human in the loop. And so the idea is it gave you 10 topics or categories or whatever for a fun fact, but clearly it's not giving you fun facts about yourself. And
right,
so it's like
right, yeah,
it's
that
like
would be
triggering
crazy.
your brain to start thinking about some categories or boxes or other things that you maybe wouldn't have thought of
Right.
previously. And so I think that lends to that principle of be the human in the loop. Like you're going to ask a question, it's going to give you some response, but your then responsibility on the other side is to, filter it, categorize it, like whatever into
Yeah.
your specific situation. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, and I think so. Before we jump full on into
yep,
into
yep,
principle two, I think that that also one of the ideas that he shared was that having AI at the table allows you outside perspective. And so
Hmm.
that's one of the key things that I think I use it all the time for writing emails or things like that, that may be of a more sensitive nature. Um, and by sensitive, I just mean like I have to treat it with kid gloves or whatever, right? Where it's a little bit more sensitive. The AI doesn't have any emotion, right? It doesn't have any
Right, right.
emotion. It just knows what the task is and it can write the email and to perform the task. And so I can get it to do that to start with, and then I can go through and kind of tweak it to make it right. But I don't have to spend 5-10 minutes going, oh, how would I say this to that person? This is
Yeah.
sort of a little
Yeah.
bit more whatever. So yeah, having that outside perspective is another piece there. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
so
For
let's
sure.
jump into the human in the loop, right? So I think you're right. The importance here is I think one of the comments that Ethan makes in the book is that think about AI as incredibly intelligent, but it doesn't know anything, right?
Hmm.
It only knows the information. It doesn't have the context or whatever, and so it can basically put things together in an order that actually isn't giving you truth. And so that's a
Right.
really good thing to keep in mind. And that's why it's important to have that human in the loop so that you can sort of check and verify that what it's giving you is correct.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I think the key part there is that GPT is like generative pre-trained transformer or whatever. And I think I
Yep.
think I
Yeah.
got that right. But it's just essentially just generating the next word, the next word, the next word. So it's not ever like some AI tools like ChatGPT or Spark
Right.
isn't like going grabbing a set of text and like re, you know giving you the exact quote of a certain set of text. It's just like generating it in the moment.
Right.
In your email example, TJ, I do think that human in the loop thing is like really important because when I've used it for more communication like things, like article or not article, but like paragraph, more less of like give me an outline of this to help me get thinking, and more of like give me like a 500-word thing. Um, I sometimes can get stuck because it doesn't talk like me or whatever.
Right.
And so like I'm like, oh, that is the right idea that I'm trying to communicate there. I've given it enough to like get it on the right track, but like that's just not how like I communicate. I don't like write phrases like this. I don't,
Right.
say furthermore or in addition or all this stuff. Like
Right.
usually I don't say that. And so having to go back and edit it can sometimes be hard because then you're like, at least for me, I'm like stuck on what it's already given. And I'm like, how do I need to change this. So then it's like, I just delete it and basically try to start from scratch on the same ideas or whatever. But yeah,
Yeah.
that human in the loop part is really important. And you can tell if you see something that's like purely AI generated.
Absolutely. I feel like maybe not as much recently, or maybe I've just gotten more adept at identifying it super quick. But there for a while, I was trying to find some information about some things. And it was just like every blog post I ran across, I was like, okay, they're all the same. Like they are all the same, and they don't sound like anything that a person would have written. Like,
Oh shit.
okay, which so
Yeah.
either people are getting better at like taking first and whatever, or the AI is getting better at generating it, and I'm just not noticing it. So I don't know.
Yeah. Uh, uh, yeah. A separate topic there, but yes, curious to the future. I think that maybe Ethan touched on this, or maybe I heard this from somewhere else. Just like right now, most of the content that's been like used to train LLMs is like human generated, but
Yeah,
in some short time, a lot of content will be synthetic. So like created by an LLM is now used to train the LLM, and it could get more and more off the rails, sort of like duplicity or whatever
yeah,
that movie
multiplicity.
was.
Yeah, yeah, that
Multiplicity.
movie with oh
Yeah.
geez, what's his name? Anyway,
Whatever.
Batman. Uh, so
Yeah.
yeah, that's right. So VHS copy of a copy, it's gonna, is there a potential that it degrades over time? So
Yeah.
certainly
But
there'll
I
be.
mean, I guess like you're saying, like you found a handful of blogs that sort of all felt exactly the same. Is like, okay, that content's out there now. And is like that going to be in the training data set for the next,
Right,
run of training for LLM?
right,
So
absolutely. The other interesting concept I thought that was discussed as a part of the human in the loop was this idea that AI at its core exists. This is sort of this anthropomorphizing whatever, but it exists to make you happy. So it's going to prioritize making you happy over being correct or accurate. So,
Hmm.
um, I had a recent example where I can't remember exactly what the scenario was, but I was telling it to give me 100 of something or something like that, right? And it came back, or no, I said I was asking it to tell me how many of a thing occurred in a thing, which I knew the answer. So I was just seeing like, can it count how many occurrences? And it came back and it was like, there's 50, or whatever. And I was like, there's definitely not 50, And so then I told it, uh try again, and then it gave me a different number that also was not right, and then finally I was like, it's actually 45 or whatever, and it came back, I was like, oh yeah, you're right, it's 45. Like, you don't.
Yeah.
So that's an area where it's like, it doesn't actually know the answer, and it can't compute because it's a language model. It's not able to like count,
Right.
in that way. So
Yeah. My example, this is like just teetering on the edge here of what I want, if I want to share this. I asked it, give me a list of all the states and the governor, senators, and representatives and their
oh
political
wow.
affiliation. And it did it awesome. And then it said like, and put it in a table. And it senators like 3 Republican, 4 Democrat. And I was like,
Not
I think
possible.
you, I think you have that wrong. There should only be two senators per state or whatever.
Yeah.
And then it did that. And then I read through the representative column and I'm like, I'm from South Dakota, and so I know we have one representative for South Dakota. I was like, I think you have the representative column wrong as well. And so it's like, oh, thank you. Yes, sorry
Yeah.
about that. And it like redid the table or whatever. But yes, like counting numbers, things like that can be a challenge for sure. But yeah, you have to definitely
Yeah.
keep an eye on that. The other example that I have is we have this friend who watches our daughter, and she always sends us a text of like the day she came and the time she was here, 11:15 to 6:30 or something like that. And I'm just like blindly like putting this into I just put it into Spark and say, how many hours is this total? Because it's like 4 or 5 days, different times or whatever. And it just tells me like 17.5 hours. And I'm like, okay, probably. I
Probably
hope
right.
so.
Yeah.
I should probably check that though. Like I'm either way underpaying her or way overpaying her.
Yeah. Right. So in that case, that's a case where, we talk about like, what's the risk there? Right. So
Right.
the risk in that case is, if you're just putting it in there just so like, okay, you can
To
go, yeah, it's
check
probably
my work.
17 and a half hours is close enough. But if you're
Seems
paying
about right.
her, then the risk
Yeah.
is higher, right? You need to be right.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, that's another one of those daily use cases. It's like I've done the math in my head a bunch of times, and I'm like, enough of this. Like
Yeah.
I have literally built a tool that does this for me. So that's what I've been using.
Before we jump into three, I think I really love this concept, and Ethan talks about. There's a study that was done. It was a combination of folks from Harvard and MIT, I believe. It was back in September-ish of 2023. But the concept is jagged frontier. It's this idea that the frontier of AI is jagged right now, and it's a bit unknown, and you really only get to know where that frontier, where that boundary line is, by using it. And I think that's a something that we talk about both in just sort of principle one, rule one, use it all the time, always invite it to the table, and then being the human in the loop. um, as we discuss these others, it really is important, I think, to understand, you talked about the where it's good and effective is, can it calculate the number of hours? It might get directionally accurate, but that's where we're on the boundary line right there, where it's like, sometimes it might be right and sometimes it might be wrong, and that's where you just have to use it a lot to understand
Hmm.
where
Hmm.
it's good, and what you can feel comfortable being like, okay, I've done this 100 times and it's 100 times given me the right answer, or I've done this
Hmm.
several times and every time it's very questionable. So
Yeah.
that's where
Yeah.
you start to learn that boundary line.
Yeah. Well, and I think like the example of I don't know where he talked about this, but the example of like giving it good. Well, maybe this is like treat it like a person. Number three, where it's
Yeah,
like
jump in.
when you tell it act this way, and here's the boundaries of how I want you to act, and I value this, and you're an expert here, and whatever this, it that's how you learn to like refine it. So Ethan used in the book an example of like he gave his an assignment to his MBA students, write a 5 paragraph essay, and he said all the first ones were really mediocre because they didn't give it enough direction
Right.
or boundaries or like tell it where the edges were. And then the second, like as they refined it over and over and over, they were better at giving it the right sort of prompt and giving it the right set of instructions. And so, yeah. And I
Yeah.
think like that, you're talking like the jagged frontier is like partly on the AI, like what the tool is capable of, and then partly on the prompter of like helping it push to the edge of like what it really is capable of.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So rule three, just to recap, is treat AI like a person, but tell it what kind of person it is. And I
Hmm.
think we have some features within Spark, and certainly ChatGPT and others are have things like this. Whether it's GPTs is what ChatGPT has. Anthropic has system messages or things like that, where basically the idea is you give it the context for how you want it to behave. And so your example there is I'm an you're going to help me, an MBA student, craft this paper. Even just that is more direction than it had otherwise, and frames it. You could go a step further and say, um, you know, act like Ethan Mollick, professor at Wharton, and
Yeah. Yeah.
when writing this, and it. Question is, does it have enough of Ethan's stuff in it
Right.
to know?
Yeah. So that follow up would be like act like Ethan Mollick, who is a business professor at University of Pennsylvania. He's specialized in entrepreneurial things or whatever. He's written these research papers and like give it titles of that. So like
Right,
the more detail you tell it of who Ethan Mollick is, it doesn't have to like guess, I guess,
right.
just a general business professor might be.
Yeah, there was a clip from Jordan Peterson. This was several months ago that I saw, but Jordan Peterson actually he like ran it through, ran a concept for a new book through it, and said, "Hey, generate chapter one of this book and write in the style of Jordan Peterson." And he said it came back, and he was like, "It was amazing. It sounded like what I would write,"
Oh
which
shoot.
is scary because I already had all of my stuff in there to know how I write.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
But
yeah.
it's really interesting that it can really dial in if you tell it how to behave.
Yep. Yep.
Cool. So let's go into number four. Assume this is the worst AI you will ever use. I think we covered this briefly up top, but I mean, there's been so many uh, there's advancements every week, and
Right.
between the time that we record this and our listeners listen, other things may have happened, but in recent history, within the last few weeks or so, Claude has rolled out a few new models, and their most powerful model, Opus, is now ahead of, right, quote unquote, leading the model race at the moment for effectiveness. So I mean, that was big
Hmm.
news, right?
Right. Yeah. So yeah, and then I think Gemini or Google has made some announcements. They recently had a developer conference, I guess. So they have some announcements. Context windows keep changing. How much stuff you can actually push into the question that you're asking. Yeah, and it's interesting. I think in the model race, I guess you could say, that everything is compared to GPT-4. It's like, oh, this just surpassed GPT-4. It's now
Right.
the most advanced one. It's like, well, it just surpassed the year-old GPT-4
Right.
that came out last year. Surely, OpenAI has like GPT-5 or 4.5 or whatever it is, like coming very soon, and so then that'll be the new standard. And the standard there's like there's this set of maybe 10 um, tasks or tests that they run these models through and see like um, how accurate are they, and so that's how they're like saying who's more or
Right.
that's how they're measuring
Sort of a
measuring this, I
standardized
guess you could say.
test for AI models.
Standardized, yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. So I think, and we've seen, so I haven't seen the like production version, but Sora has been talked about from
yeah,
OpenAI, right? And so that it's just amazing what these things are doing. Now, how does that apply to sort of where we're at with the things we're working on? Yet to be determined if we're going to have a strong need for video. But the capabilities are there, and it's interesting. So
yeah, yeah. Ethan used the analogy of it's like you just have to imagine that right now we're all playing Pac-Man, like the old arcade game Pac-Man, and like the next advancement or a couple generations of advancements will be like PlayStation 6s or whatever.
right,
And so like these like very basic graphics to, and it's not about the graphics, just about like imagine the difference in fidelity from low
right.
fidelity Pac-Man to almost realistic PlayStation 6 games or whatever. So
Yeah.
and just could happen within the next year of development.
Well, and I think we can't really do it on the podcast here, but I do think one of the best illustrations of this for me is the charts from Midjourney's
Right.
advancement, right? From like it's over a 24-month period. It goes from like a kind of crudely drawn thing that's got, arms sticking out of the wrong spot, and now it's like close up with beads of
Yeah.
sweat and rain, and like you can get the that level of fidelity. And I think the
Yeah.
most recent, like version 6, so you go from version 1 to version 6 and you just
Yeah.
huge advancements.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think the same thing with the LLMs as well.
Yeah. So maybe just kind of wrap this up and tie a bow on it. Those 4 principles were: always bring AI to the table, be the human in the loop, treat AI like a person, and assume that this is the worst AI you will ever use. And I guess just the general sort of like reminder, drumbeat, whatever you want to call it, is use
Engage.
AI tools daily for various things, personal things, work things, family things, image things, video things, whatever, text things, analyze whatever, so that you understand, like, okay, April, whatever, this is the limit. And then May, whatever, that's the limit. It got better at this or it got better at that. So that you're able to continue to refine your own like ability to understand and judge and make good decisions based on what the AI delivers back to you.
Yeah, that's great. I appreciate the summary, Aaron. That was really good. So, as we wrap up today, we again invite you all to leave some comments. We're on YouTube or wherever you find your podcast. Obviously, you found us, but feel free to head over, leave some comments, rate us. Um, Open to feedback, right? We want to know what's valuable to y'all. I'm really excited about some of the discussions we've had about some of the upcoming things that we get to chat about. So, keep listening and we'll keep pushing stuff out here. So, thanks all.
Awesome.
Thanks, Aaron.
Thanks, TJ.